we're going to do an activity, and the partnership actually identified the top 10 topics that are most often and frequently asked about when the intake workers take calls. So to learn about and to practice our ability to respond effectively to these top 10 questions, we're going to do a little bit of work in groups. And I've put some things on your tables. Actually, Natalie and I have put a lot of things on your tables, so I'm going to try and help you identify what you need to use for this activity. We're going to be taking turns role-playing and observing in order to provide feedback to each other. So what you need to do, we have instructions and we've got them written up here, as well as I'm going to talk to you about them. So at your table you need to select 2 role players. One will be the parent and one will be a worker. The remaining 3 participants are observers and will provide the feedback. Specifically there's a recording sheet that's called the do's and the don'ts. It's a simple chart. For each set of 2 tables, so table 5, table 3, table 9, you have 1 recording sheet. So you need to select a recorder for the do's and the don'ts, and then you also need to select your observer, and your observers and your role play people. So one person's going to be a parent, one person's going to be the intake worker, and the other 3 or 4, depending on the number of people at your tables, will be observers. So those observers are going to record the things that they see and the things that they hear that they think are good, which is the do's, and the things that they think and see and hear that aren't so good, and those will be the don'ts. So on your tables are these little cards. I think everybody's probably got 4 of them. You're going to choose 2 scenarios. You're going to do one, we're going to take about 5 minutes, where you're going to role play the scenario and then provide feedback for about another 10 minutes. And then I'm going to time you and I'll let you know when to switch, and switch role players, switch parent, switch intake worker, and switch observers. And then we're going to do it again with the second scenario. And then after that, we're going to take them all up together. We'll create a list of do's and don'ts for everyone, and that will be compiled and then sent out to everyone at another time. So I'll start with table 1. So if you could read one of your scenarios and then provide us with some of your do's and your don'ts.
I have just received this question. Scenario: overwhelmed parents don't know where to begin with newly diagnosed child. Question: what do I do? Where do I go? Who can help me? So the do's and don'ts of our scenario. The do's are: worker acknowledged the distress of the parent who is calling in. She discussed the options of the particular agency that the parent called into. So we used Carrie's Place. So the worker talked about the different programs and supports that Carrie's Place offers. She took the name of the parent and her contact information so that she could connect them with services, early intervention services, YSSN, other services. The parent said, "What's case management? I don't understand what case management was." So the worker explained to the parent what case management was and what she can expect. And then the parent was really stressing out about what the first step would be. How can she continue on with, like, what should she do next? And the intake worker pinned down the orientation date that she could come into at Carrie's Place, so that it gave her a specific date that she could focus on, and that would be her easy first step to do.
Excellent.
No.
And you don't work for Carrie's Place, but that was your idea?
We were faking it.
Good faking it.
Some don'ts. She didn't ask how the parent was doing with the diagnosis. And explain that they must take time for themselves.
She didn't explain that the parent must take time for herself?
Right.
Okay.
She didn't do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got too many calls to make.
She also said, while she did take her name and information, she then flipped it and said to the parent, "Do you have a name or a pen and a piece of paper? I'm going to give you a bunch of phone numbers to call." So that was, when you're role playing, it's just whatever I can throw down. And then another suggestion was that she could have suggested to the parent to get a file folder to start organizing all of the paperwork. So
I'd say a binder, but file folder's a good start.
That's it.
Sorry, what was the last one?
Get a file folder so that they can start organizing, or binder. They can organize all of their.
That's a do. Oh, she didn't say that, but
she
put
didn't
that on
say
the
it, but yeah. I didn't.
I kind of didn't, yeah. That's a flip side of your paper. No, that's very good. You did a good job. Were you by any chance the intake worker? Oh, okay. Good job. Table number 2. Let's see one of your scenarios. And come to the microphone, Jamie. Project that voice.
So our scenario, the one I picked anyway, was that the dad calls in requesting services but has no documentation of diagnosis. And then the question would be, how do I access services? So one of the first don'ts that we agreed upon was don't turn them away because there's no diagnosis. I know every organization has different requirements in terms of diagnosis, but you wouldn't want to say, like, no diagnosis, so we can't help you, and just turn that family away. So you would want to probe a little bit more and ask them further questions. So that was our big do, would be probe. How old is the child? Whereabouts are you? Having an understanding how old the child would help direct to services that are going to help them. Letting them know that if you don't have the information that you get back to them, so giving them a timeline, like letting them know I'll get back to you in a couple of days would be good. Following up and checking in would be a do. So after that initial meeting, setting up a time to follow up and check in, and also asking how the best way to share information is. Some families prefer talking on the phone, some families want to meet in person, some families might want to email, asking what the best way to share information is with them. Yeah, and we had a lot of other good conversation based around it.
Did you have any don'ts?
I think the main don't was don't just turn them away.
Oh, yes, sorry. Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you. That's good. Table number 3.
Here. Okay, so you're an intake worker and have just received this question. Scenario: parent is in panic mode, wanting her son to live elsewhere because of his behaviors. Her question: I need a group home immediately. How can you help me with this? So this actually was our most difficult scenario, and so we were focused really on the do's of how to support the parent who was asking for something that no intake worker could deliver the same day. So the do's included provide emotional support to the caller.
I think that's a good point that you made, Kim, that they're asking you something that the intake worker can't provide. So it's good.
And to slow the conversation down.
You can speed up.
And
just
that's
for
really
catch up.
connected to a don't, which is don't go into remedy mode right away with asking a lot of quick questions about have you tried.
Yeah.
Don't go into what mode?
Remedy, you know, sort of the solutions, offering quick solutions. But instead to find out more about what's happening. So that's our third point. The question would be what's going on, rather than asking what can I help you with. And you know, following that to get as much information as possible before redirecting, particularly if the information is going in a way that you know other services might need to be engaged.
Mm-hmm.
And I think probably our most important point was that it needed time, and you have to be prepared to give it the time that it needs. And that would also mean that if you are taking a call and you don't have at least 30 minutes, don't take the call. So we don't want parents to feel rushed off the phone. So that's it for us.
Okay, that's good. Table number 4.
The scenario that we did was the parent who has a new diagnosis for her daughter of ASD, and the question was, who can help me?
Okay.
And our do's included the intake worker identifying herself and her organization and what her organization can do to support her. She greeted well, and she gave some information and then gathered some information. explaining the intake process. She was enthusiastic and gave hopeful suggestions and sounded hopeful.
Good.
Gave direction to a specific program she knew of, but and directly answered questions, and asked parent what works for her. Our one don't was if you don't know what other agencies provide, to say that you don't know, but you will find out and get back to them and
Awesome.
set up that.
Good job.
And if it's not the right door, fine, help them find the right door.
Good. Okay. Well, you're going to have an easy time doing the warm transfer anyhow. We're going to explain that in a few minutes. Table number 5. You guys right here. Wow, she's got a supplementary list even.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that everything that everybody has already offered as far as the do's and don'ts were already on our list.
Okay. Then just give
And-
us the highlights of the ones that
Yeah,
aren't.
so I just want to give you a couple extras. I mean, I guess we had 2 scenarios. One was the new immigrant calling to get help with the child's school placement, and the other was the adult male who had called in without knowing about, or not really sure about what it was that he was looking for.
Okay.
So the do's are to introduce self and obtain caller's name and phone number right away at the very beginning of that call. So just in case we get cut off.
That's a good point.
Do offer to find information and return a call if, I mean, the reality is that we don't always have the information right off the bat, and sometimes we need to call the person back. Do tune into the caller's emotional state and try and match the style as best as you can in terms of what might be required to accommodate that level of anxiety or the level of agitation that the person is experiencing. Ask who, if any, they have been connected or are connected with. That's another do, by the way. Do direct the client to a family doctor if a diagnosis is not confirmed. So anyway, that's just part of what sometimes has to happen. We didn't have many don'ts, but really it was just don't make random reassuring promises, and don't say no or never.
Okay. Good
Thank
points. Good. Number 6.
Okay, so our scenario was an adult male who was calling in, and he was a 27-year-old who had no friends, he can't keep a job, and he thinks he's got Asperger's, and wanted to know where he could get help. So our intake worker specifically works with children. However, she did use the words that she said that he did call the right place. She did offer to help with a warm transfer to services that did deal with adults, and to with questions that he had, that she would find out the answers to those if she didn't know the answer. She also did offer a reputable website because he really wanted to start today, finding out answers. So she offered a reputable website that he'd be able to access to start to look up what Asperger's was, because he wasn't even sure himself of a diagnosis. And then with the don'ts, I think the only one that that I really picked up was making sure that you don't use words that people don't understand. So he didn't know what his diagnosis or what Asperger's was, but the word spectrum was used in the conversation. So I think making sure that we use appropriate language and don't use acronyms when you're talking to people who have no idea what they are. So, sorry, that's my little plug. I'm in primary care, and sometimes when I do call different services and people are throwing out CTN, DACS, and all these things, although I've learned them now from this course, it can be really, really hard, even as a worker, let alone as a parent. So acronyms can be really dangerous because we don't know what they mean.
So excellent point, and we will have a little activity later this afternoon about acronyms. So, thank you. I lost track. Was that 7? 6. 7.
Okay, so the question was that the mother called in and said she doesn't want her ex-husband to have any access and shared records with CTN, or Children's Treatment Network. And her question is, she said, my husband was abusive to both myself and my son. I don't want him to have any knowledge of what services we are receiving. How do I ensure he has no access to our file?
You guys got a good one.
Yeah. So, one of the don'ts is don't reassure unless you have the information and know exactly what the law is and what your policies and procedures are.
Yes.
And it's the do's are, say, if you're not sure, to check back before you answer. Somebody, one of the people at our table who did it, did know the procedures. So she was able to talk about the documentation that's needed, about checking back. And the other thing that we thought was important in the do is to really talk about the details, not just to generalize, so the person can feel more reassured. So it was also a lot of it is about policies and procedures as well.
Table 8.
We had the question, you've just received this question from a calling family member. Mom is crying and has received the diagnosis for her 5-year-old. And the question of mother is, I don't think this diagnosis is right. Where can I get a second opinion? So the intake worker had not clearly heard that the diagnosis had come from the Children's Treatment Network, so she questioned, shed some doubt on the diagnosis by questioning, well, who did this come from? Because sometimes people will give a false diagnosis because they're not qualified. So that was perhaps a don't, in that she bought into the mother's tears and fear by questioning, well, maybe it isn't so. So the good things that she did was she turned it around, found out that the diagnosis was from the Children's Treatment Network, and got clarification about where the mother had been, who she had spoken to. She let the mother know what her role is at the agency, what she can do to help, gave her options on how to receive the information, which has already been mentioned. Did she want email? Did she want a telephone contact? She was clearly going to stay in touch with this mother. And so it was an excellent response from the intake worker.
Good, good. Okay. 9. 9.
So the scenario we have is the family looking for funding to support various therapies they are interested in providing to their son. So the question is, what are the different types of government support for the therapies? So actually the role, the lady actually who pretend to be a worker, actually like she did a very good job, but because for the learning purpose, she did some don't.
Okay.
So which we all know those are don't, okay? So the do's, actually, like she said, I'm glad you called, and make the parent feel very comfortable.
Good.
And she did provide a lot of resources, and also she offered the options for the services. And she offered very truly and face-to-face support. So, and she offered the parent to fill out the paperwork for the parent, so which a lot of parents, they don't like the paperwork. So she offered to fill out the paperwork. And at the end, she actually summarized all, whatever they taught in that morning. For the don'ts, at the very beginning, she just pretend she didn't really listen to her parents' needs. So the parent repeat a few times about, I need money, I need funding.
Oh, okay.
And also, she didn't actually ask, she did ask actually say, what kind of therapist you need. So that's the don't. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And you guys gave yourself a round of applause too, or something. Number 10.
So our scenario was the parent wanted further information for further knowledge about ASD. And the question was, are there educational workshops that my husband and I can take to learn more about ASD?
So we discussed that before we give an answer, it's important to sometime ask further questions to the parent, like what region do you live? We don't want to send them to a workshop up in Simcoe if they live in Markham.
Yeah.
So that was one. Another thing we did, or don't, that we all agreed on, was certainly don't give them a website, like the Carey's Place website, and send them on their way. So we explained that there were courses and workshops, free workshops through Carey's Place, and we asked them if they were connected with Carey's Place, and if they also felt comfortable on the computer, because even though the workshops are available online, some parents are not comfortable registering online, so we offered to do it for them. Another thing that the parent said that her husband was interested in attending the workshops, but English was not his first language, but was interested in getting the information, how we could provide that for him. So we did some brainstorming and offering to send, get some PowerPoints, some information either through mail or through the computer, so that maybe his wife could translate for him, or encouraged a family member to come to the workshops to do the translation for them. So we worked around that as well.
Good ideas.